Okay, so we're going to continue on working on cylinders, and it dawned on me last week that it'd be helpful to understand, you know, some of the internal components of a cylinder. So we're going to take a cylinder apart and talk about kind of what this is. And what we're going to talk about is basically applicable to any lock set in the world ever, of all time. Meaning there's a blockage. And it's just that simple. And the key is what gets the blockage out of the way. So the blockage in a pin tumbler cylinder, which is a patent of Linus Yale Jr., the son of a famous lock maker right around the time of the Civil War, who was absolutely influenced by an Egyptian design. And I'll see if I can find that. Let's see. Actually, let's just do it now. PT. Yeah. So anyone can just search for Egyptian lock design. So if you are enjoying this video, please click thumbs up or like, and also please consider subscribing to our channel. Let's move on to the rest of the video. Okay, so what we're looking at here in this image, this, if I understood correctly, this type of lock was actually extremely massive, where the key alone was 6 foot in length. And this obviously must be some miniaturized version of it. It clearly is. But what they did was they were able to insert this 6 foot long piece of wood with these little tips on there. And when they lifted it, what happened was the tip of that got to right here. That's the shear line. So it cleared the blockage, is what the key did. So, you know, you can immediately see how, if anyone knew what the key looked like and knew its dimensions, they could duplicate the key. They could have easily have made this a little more difficult in the sense of maybe doing something like but they could have added something like this, and maybe they could have made it actually shallower here and made it much longer here, so that the length of what was on the key had to be unusual. They could have done it something like that as well. I mean, I'm sure those brilliant people, you know, would have easily figured that out. So the point of the matter is, you're seeing a blockage. That's what this is. So this is 4,000 years ago. This is a key. Now, what we're going to take a look at here. If you've not hit subscribe yet, we would very much appreciate if you did, and hopefully you're enjoying this video. Now, let's get back to it. Is a typical pin tumbler. This happens to be a rim cylinder, is what this is. This is a pin tumbler cylinder. There are different types of tumblers. There's lever tumbler. You know, lever tumbler. There are disc tumblers or wafer tumblers. Then there are pin tumblers. There are also other ways to create the blockage depending on the platform of the cylinder. They get quite exotic and actually quite brilliant. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I'll have to pinch this clip back on. I should have asked you for an easier cylinder to take apart. Okay. Alright. So basically taking this apart allowed me to, all I needed to do is to remove that C-clip. The tail, this is called a tail piece or a cylinder bar, but we call it a tail piece. What happens now is I can disassemble the plug from the shell of the cylinder, and without getting into the mechanics and the way you go about taking cylinders apart, I'm just going to do what I need to do here to show you the inner workings. Whoops. Come here, you. So now you got these cuts on this key. You can tell that they're different depths. Well, if you think about what we just talked about, in order for all of these pins to be flush when that key is inserted, you could probably make an educated guess that that fourth cut that pin has to be longer than that first cut. Let's take a look at the pin on the first cut. That's how long that is. Let's take a look at the pin on the fourth cut. First and fourth. So now you've just unlocked how locks work, how pin tumbler keys work. The cuts on the key have to mate up to the blockage. If the key, and now you can think to yourself, oh shoot, well, if the key goes in the cylinder but doesn't turn, what's preventing it from turning? The length of your pin tumblers are different. It's that simple. The point is now we've unlocked kind of the mystery of how these things work. Allowing you to understand why a key wouldn't work. Well, there's a blockage. And if you've got a key that doesn't work, it's the wrong key. Meaning, we would call it the wrong key, but there's something physically present about the key that will not create a shear line. So when these pins, in order for this to work, the pins must be properly flush with the top of the plug. That's what that's called. Now, what's happening up in here, this area here is called the Bible. It's harder to see on a rim cylinder, but that's called literally the Bible. I don't know why that comes that way, but up in the top of the cylinder, in the Bible section, you've got a driver pin. That's spring-loaded, because you know what's behind there? Yeah, there's a spring. So what's happening is, as the key goes in and out, it's forcing those pins to move up and down, which is forcing those driver pins to move up and down, because it's all under the bias of the spring. The spring is pushing it all down. What's pushing it down in our drawing? Gravity. If they put a spring up here, but gravity is what's keeping those down. So when you've got a 6-foot long key, you could say to yourself, well, shoot, how big was the lock? How big must that lock have been? It must have been a giant lock. So those tumblers in the Egyptian lock were probably a few pounds each, so gravity would work.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if you could fish your arm in there and get them all lifted, you could be able to slide that door open. And there were hundreds of years between, say the 10th century and the 17th century where there was no lock development. Very little. And you know why? Nobody had nothing of value. There's nothing worth locking up. You're not going to come to my land where I'm a, indentured servant. I have to work your land as a farmer just so that I can get food to live. What am I going to come and steal? Your land? So there was not a lot of lock development because there wasn't stuff to lock up. But that's where Linus Yale's Jr.'s father came in, because once there, you get to Washington's era, Jefferson's era, now people have valuables. Where do you stick your valuables? Even to this day, you take them to the bank, put them in a safe deposit box. So the guys at the banks had the best locks, and that's what Junior's father was into, and many other people at the time. So important, I think, for us to be able to understand the anatomy. You can't break this. The only thing you can do is the pins can... All right, here we go. The only thing you can do is dump the pins out. You got 5 pins, you got 5 holes, you got 5 cuts. You would be able to look at that and say, okay, now let's put this one in the first hole. That's too high. I'm telling you that's too high. I know from my experience. That's a bad example because I wanted it to look really grotesquely high. Okay, that's too high. That ain't going to turn, because the top of the plug and the inside of the shell, it needs to be between those. It needs to be so flush that the plug can turn. You got a pin sticking up like that. That ain't going to work. So, all right, that ain't the right pin. Put that aside. I'm clearly looking for one shorter.
A little bit too deep in there.
It is a little deep, but it might be okay. It might be okay. This is where I would come in, and I would look at that key and say, okay, so the second cut's deeper than the first cut.
And then
the first and the third look like they're the same cut. The fourth cut is clearly deepest, and that fifth cut might be the same as the second cut. So we may have 2 sets of pins that are the same length. And all I'm trying to say with that is, you're going to use the tools that you already have. you're the tool of observation. You're looking at something. I'm saying that these two pins appear to be the same, maybe. Yeah, and these two might be longer. Yeah, so shorters, longers, and then this weird one. That's the 4th chamber. We know that. It's the only one that's like that. So we've got cut 1 and 3 that appear to be the same, and they appear to be the shorter ones. So let's test our theory. That's the 3rd chamber. That's the 1st chamber. Those look really good. Whoop, maybe not. Nope.
That was just
That one, yeah, that one looks too long for the cut. That one looks good. So now those two should be the same size. And all I'm doing is I'm sight reading the key. Sight reading is something that comes with experience. Through experience, you'll develop skill. See, that doesn't look right. Let's see.
probably the other way around.
We got something wrong there. Let's put that into the 5th chamber. Put that into the 2nd chamber. Yeah, I like that. That's when you run your finger over that, it's smooth. I'm doing it this way. Yeah. Those pins are ever so slightly below, and that's okay because if we study the top of the pin, it's crowned like that. Why? Because there's a curvature to the plug. The pin can't be just straight, otherwise it won't, it'll stick
Go
up
with it.
and the outside edges of that. When we put this back together, we'll know we got it right when it just works super smooth. And this is the way it came apart. So it's important to know as we progress through the rest of the book, what is the anatomy of a cylinder? But whether you're dealing with one manufacturer versus 20 others, it always boils down to a blockage. And that's just the term that they use. It's a blockage. And the key allows you to remove the blockage. Now, high security locks, and even Peter Field from Medico, who's one of the 2 names on the patent of the Medico 3, I wrote an article about meeting Peter Field, even though I had no idea who he was. I'm sitting with this guy, and I'll send you the article from the magazine that it was published in, asking him to help me review something, a different article I was writing. We sit there for like 20 minutes. Well, long story short, I get his card. 2-3 months later, I'm sitting at my desk at home. I'm studying for the test, and I'm looking at the medical patent, and his card fell out of my textbook. I'm like, oh, okay. Oh, what a nice guy. I wonder how he's doing. And I'm like, oh, Peter Field. I wonder if his wife calls him Pete, And I look at the template. There are 2 names on the patent. There are 2 names on that patent. One of them is Peter Field. I says, my God. The most famous people in the world that no one's ever heard of. So the point of all of that is the sheer genius that went into that Egyptian design. And then Linus Yale to say, yeah, I can improve on that. And then a guy like Peter Field, where he's created a lock that has the blockages, but now there are there are different types of blockages located in different places on the cylinder itself. And that's what really renders it really brilliant. So regardless of the system, there's going to be a blockage. And when I say system, Yale and Corbin and Medico and everybody else has different, all but identical platforms, but some of them will get to the end result via a different means. But it's always a blockage.
Okay.
A paper clip can be a key. The Egyptian lock, and when my computer goes to sleep and I hit it too quick, it kills that monitor. I have to fix that. You stick something into the cylinder, it can be a key. The question is does whatever you stick into the cylinder operate the cylinder? If you can make a key other than this key work that cylinder, you've made a key. So the point of that is you get high security locks, and there are stories where people can get those open, and it's because they can, because they understand how the lock works and can get it open. But the reason that they're successful is because they understand the anatomy of the cylinder. There's a blockage, and the key removes the blockage. The blockage in this case is called it's a tumbler, Tumbler, but it's a pin tumbler. I could show you 2 other lock types that are blockages, and they're tumblers, but they're not pin tumblers. They are different shapes of metal that work in different ways. The lever tumblers are used today in safe deposit boxes. You go to the safe deposit box at the bank, and you want to put your important paperwork there, it has a different key. It's a very different key, even though to the average person it looks the same. But the tumblers on the inside are different. Then the disc wafer and that lever tumbler is actually used very often in banks in Europe because they can become very high security because there's 14 lever tumblers inside of here. If you recall, there were 5. So it goes to say that a cylinder with less tumblers may be considered less secure. If there was 1 tumbler in there, you could, by using a tool and putting some rotational force on the plug, take something that you can lift that tumbler up like a paper clip, and as you're trying to turn it, you lift it up slowly, it'll go. So you've just kicked it open. You put some rotational force. You could take a piece of metal and put some force on it so that the plug wants to turn. And you can insert a tool in there to lift that. Just slowly lift it, and eventually it'll be shear. And because you've got rotational force, the plug will turn. I could do that with one. I'm awful at picking locks. Anna's much better.
Could you make a key just by looking at the cylinder?
So it's interesting. There are actually people. So when you look down into the plug of the cylinder, you can see that first pin. You can see that first pin there.
Oh, okay.
If you were to get in there with, there are very small cameras that allow people to try to decode that by eye. So there is a whole science in doing that, and there are other ways to bypass the cylinder without having the key that works it.
Is that another way to look at the profile of the cylinder, to look at and see Schleg?
The Germans would say Schlage, but it's Schleg.
Same thing, just looking at the milling and then the broaching of it.
That's broached, that's milled. Yep.
Okay, broach. And I can see that, okay, at least this pattern of the key. They don't need that specifically all the way down to the end. As long as I get the pins somewhat, I don't need to worry about that. The height of the key.
Well, the key's got the height of the key has to fit in the broaching. It's got to physically go in. So if the height of the key was so every system, whether it be Schlage or Arrow or Corbin, they all have specifications. The key height is this. The pin diameter is this.
Okay.
Everything is dimensionally unique to each manufacturer. Technically, when Barb is keying locks, and something that you'll learn to do in the near future, she's using what we call a universal kit. So she could key an Arrow, a Schlage, a Kwikset, because they all use extremely similar dimensional properties. If you took my caliper and measured the diameter of one of those pin tumblers from a Schlage lock and went to a Kwikset lock, they are not going to be exact, but they're so close that they're almost you can almost think of them as interchangeable, even though they're not. You could make that work, but you don't. You don't mix systems.
Okay.
Because it could open vulnerabilities. It's not the way it was designed and engineered. The important part is to really get the understanding that there's a blockage, and the key removes the blockage. Every platform of cylinders has its own unique way of getting to the end result. How do I secure this cylinder, or in whatever the cylinder is actually securing? So this is a rim cylinder on this guy's job. This could go to a panic device. This could go to a rim lock. This could go to a bypass and an alarm. I don't know what he's going to use. This is a very generic type of cylinder. But whatever that cylinder is actually working. So when you turn the key in your car, it closes a circuit allowing the battery to energize the starter in the car. But all that key is doing is making an electrical circuit that was open and closing it. So all the key's really doing is removing the blockage.
Okay.
Maybe that might be, I don't really understand automotive very well, but in essence I think that's what it is. But as we continue to talk about cylinders and keys, and I'll use the term pin tumbler, I want you to understand in your head a little bit, oh, okay, that's what a pin tumbler looks like. And the other tumblers don't really matter at this point, although we'll look at that stuff, because we're not dealing with 17th century technology, or we're not dealing with extremely low security that you'd have and a disc tumbler, which are cam locks, which are extreme low security. You could, locksmiths can look down into that plug and just see what it is and lift it and bypass that stuff. So the goal of today was to understand what the pin tumbler is and how basically one key will work a cylinder and the other won't.
Mm-hmm.
The length of the pin tumblers are directly related to the depth of the cuts of the key. The quantity of pin tumblers, I don't think I finished that thought, is definitely something that's associated to security. So if I had one pin tumbler, I could probably pick that open pretty easy. But if I had 7, it's going to be a lot harder to do that. There are 4 pin tumbler cylinders, there are 3 pin, there are 5 pin, there are 6 pin, there are 7 pin. And after that, you're really, I don't know of any 8 pin cylinders myself. But when we get into more, we won't. But if you were to dive into, in some of the books that I have, more exotic platforms of cylinders, yeah, you'll have 14. You'll have the Japanese company Miwa. They have a flat key, and it has embedded in it, in strategic locations, magnets. So you obviously know what 2 magnets. Mm-hmm. You've got the north and south poles opposite. They'll attract. You put a north and north together, they bounce off each other. So these guys put the other magnet up into the Bible of the cylinder, so when you insert that, the magnets are either pushing them away or pulling them together. So it's really cool. So the thing is, I could take a piece of clay, put this in there, and then I could make a key. Or if I was really, really good, and you and I went out to dinner and I looked at that key long enough, I could probably say 24363, 24363, 24363, and I could keep that code in my head, and I can go back to the lab and cut me a key. The point of saying that, in the locksmiths are the most ethical people in the world that I have generally found. Observation. It all boils down to what it physically looks like.
Same thing with the milling of the key. You can just have, say, if you didn't see a milling and you just had the pin tumblers, of course you wouldn't really need the milling of the key unless once you get down to it, because you can't put a straight key into that.
Only a Schlage C is going to fit in a Schlage C. Well, that's not exactly true, but it doesn't matter for this conversation. The milling of the key blank must match the broaching of the cylinder plug. A quickset is not going to go into a Schlage. I say quickset because it's a name that many people have heard of. The locks on your house could be quickset. They could be Schlage. They could be anybody. It doesn't matter. But it's like sticking a Ford key into a Chevy. They're both keys, but it ain't going to go in the cylinder because the milling and the broaching don't match.
Okay.
And really, and that we will get into paracentric probably next week, but the way in which the milling and broaching are created is extremely unique to manufacturers. The more unusual your broaching is, the more unusual your key has to be. And they will design, and this was probably drawn 90 years ago. It would be my guess how old this broaching is. But the more exotic you make that, the more difficult it is to duplicate a key, the more difficult it is to manipulate the cylinder from the outside. So the keyway is what it's called. The keyway has everything to do with being inherently a part of the DNA of the system. There are so many possible cuts in a Schlage system. There happen to be 10. In Quickset, there's 6. Doesn't matter. What's important is that you know, what system am I working in? What's the rules of that system? In Schlage, there are 10 possible cuts, 0 through 9. 0 is the shortest, 9 is the longest. You can then learn, refer to paperwork, read catalogs, and understand the rest of the rules as it pertains to Schlage. What's the increment between a 5 and a 6? How much longer is it? Is it the same between a 3 and a 4? Understand the rest of the rules so that you can work within that system. Now, Schlage and Quickset and Arrow, the regular stuff, this is all extremely easy to learn, and we're halfway there. You get into exotic keyways, exotic systems, you've got more to think about now because they've intentionally tried to make it harder to bypass the cylinder. But the real takeaway here is blockages, what the key does, and what a pin tumbler looks like, because I'm going to continue to refer to that stuff. We discussed the length of the pin tumblers, the depth of the keys are directly related. And now, having that knowledge, you can start to think to yourself, okay, I wonder. And it's the I wonder part that's important. I spoke to a locksmith 2 days ago. He's been doing it for 30 years. The guy called about something that I thought in my head, man, you're a locksmith, you should know this. The point is every day, even after 30, and the guy's a certified master locksmith, he has a credential above mine. You learn every day. There is no one great manual that says, here's, Mel Brooks doesn't come down and say, here's your book. This is everything you need. And when you take tests through ALOA, they'll tell you, hey, what do I need to pass this test? Well, experience is what they're going to tell you. Your on-the-job training is what is going to allow you to pass. So I'm going to ALOA to take a 3-day class on safe deposit locks. I don't have that test yet taken. I took it. I could never pass it. And I asked Dawn, the secretary there, basically I want to know how much is going to be covered in the class. She says, most of it's in there, but your on-the-job training, so I've got a safe deposit bag. I actually went to the storage facility, but I understand very well how they work. So if you've ever gone to a safe deposit box, there's the guard key. The bank lady is going to come in. There's two cylinders. She's got to put her key in and turn it. Only then can you insert the owner's key and will it turn, provided it's the right guard key. You can start to think in your head, well, shoot, man, that's cool. How does that work? And you start looking at drawings and taking one apart and actually playing with it. Like, wow, my God.
Yeah, because you need that first one to unlock the second one to allow the second key
Not unlock. Go back to our basic terms. The guard key removes the blockage that will allow the owner's key to remove its blockage. Okay. It's that simple.
And that's safety deposit box, different kind of cylinder.
It is a different platform. They have lever tumblers, and they use what
tumblers.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever really get into it, but for curiosity's sake, I will show you one. And they use what's called a flat key. It looks like that, but it's flat. So what could you think about it? There's no milling. It's flat. It's a flat piece of steel that they've taken, and rather than a cutter like this, it's a slotter. It's a thin carbide cutter that just will cut a slot into it, because these lever tumblers, they're just pieces of metal, and that comes up like this. This is called the gate. It will come up and move it like this is all it really does. And when you have your locker lock, when you have your locker lock in high school, 3 to the right, 2 to the left, 1 to the, whatever it was, they work in the same way where they're moving these, I forget the names of them, their own tumblers. You go this far, what you're doing is you're taking that disc and you're rotating it where the gate is, and then you move the other one, so you're lining up these gates, and you do the third one, and there could be 4 wheels is what they're called. You can then drop that bar in there, and that's how the obloy works as well. You line up all the gates. That's the only way. So if you've got the wrong combination in your locker lock, your gates aren't lining up. But what's the key? The key is the combination. Where you stop, where you stop. That's your key. Because what are you trying to do? Remove the blockage. The blockages are when the wheels aren't lined up. Their gates aren't lined up. And when you think about, when you approach the study of locksmithing, you can always go back to the fundamental of, there's a blockage. The key removes the blockage. We're not even saying pin tumbler, lever tumbler. We're not using these exotic terms that no one ever heard of. It ain't in the dictionary. You won't find pin tumbler in the dictionary. You'll find it in the locksmith dictionary, but not in the Merriam-Webster. But it's always this basic approach, whether it be a lock that's oh my good locks. I got a great Chubb lock from the 1700s that is in my box. But it always goes back to the basic. What's the blockage? What's the platform? What am I dealing with? And through time, you take enough of these Schlage cylinders apart, you're going to know how it works. You're ready for the next one.
Blockage. Key allows to remove the blockage to be smooth.
Yeah.
unlock it.
Shear is what we call it. Shear.
Shear.
Shear. Those two lines have to be shear between the top pins and the bottom pins. SHEAR is what it is, a shear line. If you don't have shear, shear is also shear is this. So if you have forces operating in this fashion, it's in shear. And there have been instances like an avalanche. All that snow's sitting up there, and when it breaks in shear.
Oh, okay.
When you got shear, you got an avalanche. When you got shear, you got a key that'll turn. So when it's sliding like that, it'll work. And that's another good thing about our industry. Our terms they come from... You know why that's called a rim cylinder? You don't, but you're about to, because the lock that it works on is usually installed on the perimeter of the door. So if you've got a lock that's on the outside edge of the door,
okay,
it's on the rim of the door, or the perimeter of the door, the outside. And this is a rim cylinder. So it's fun in our business because these things, exit devices, people call them panic devices, but you won't find panic device in a catalog. You will, because people think of it as a crash bar or a panic device. What are you doing if you hit that? You're panicking. You need to get out. And that's why that. So my point is, the terms that are come up with, they're fun in the sense that they come from some guy like me and you. What are we going to call this? Just call it a panic device. You know? Call it a blockage. I don't know, man. Call it whatever you want.
This be used for something outside, say like the outside door?
So a rim cylinder wouldn't be used in our outside door because our outside door requires a mortise cylinder. It looks just like this. Without this, if it had threads on it and a different, it's not a tailpiece. It's now a cam. So well, I will show you a mortise cylinder when I've got one handy, but it's basically the same thing, just with thread, because they thread in.
Okay.
There's a special screw that takes that, removes that cylinder. You thread it in and out. You put it in, boom, 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 boom. You got the right cam on the back to work for the type of lock. You're good. You can absolutely, we'll play with the front door lock at some point. I'll just show you a mortise cylinder. But I don't want to get into the physical keying. We'll get into the physical keying later. I want to go through the basic terminologies. But being absolutely in a very unbound sort of limit, to be curious about it is the key. Because it's that natural curiosity that will propel you through the learning process. I wanted to learn how to key small format, and it's far more complex than this, in the sense of, if this is all you know, it's far more complex. And it was only because of my natural curiosity that prompted me to, well, let's try it. Well, that didn't work. Let's try it this way. What's going on? How, blah, blah, blah. And they, oh, wait a minute, eureka. And then you call an expert, and they help you. But without that natural inkling of curiosity, you don't ever walk that path. To you, you're just happily, blissfully blind as to how the magic works behind the curtain. It's also, something that compels extreme responsibility in people, because once you know how cylinders work, you can then, at least to me, it allows me to understand the vulnerabilities of things. How could it be better? What's its Achilles heel? Anna could, if you gave her probably 10 minutes, she could get that open without a key. So if she was standing outside your building, she could probably get in without a key. Now, what all that means is, it's making you think about, as someone who sells locks to customers, hey, does this platform meet your requirements? Is it strong enough? Is it secure enough? Do we need to talk about more secure ways to prevent someone like me picking your lock open? Nobody picks locks open unless they are authorized to do so. And if you are, you're going to get arrested. You will be in. Anyway, that's why locksmiths are the most ethical people in the world, because they possess the knowledge. In Fantasyland, one would not want to make an enemy of a locksmith. Okay. Because they know about how locks work, and they know about how other things work. But when you understand, you can start to say to yourself, so I've got a client that I'm going to be doing some doors for, and the client wants this and that, and I'm able to suggest to them, well, let's not use these Schlags. They're great, but clearly you have a property or a facility or what you're storing there is going to require something other than me going to Home Depot to cut your key. You give this key to the landscaper, to the cleaning lady, to your employee. You have the key to the front door of the shop. You go to Home Depot and cut this. They're not going to ask you. Now you've got a key to the shop. Are you authorized to have that key to the shop? You know, maybe you are, maybe you're not. But if someone isn't, what are they doing with the key? Being able to lock down access to the key is where high security comes in. Anyway.
Can you use 2 different keys for the same cylinder?
Okay, great question. So, in that question, the broaching is going to stay the same. What would it take to make 2 different... When you say different, what do you mean different? Explain different to me. How are key A and key B? How are they different? They're physically different somehow, right? How are they physically different?
First example, maybe different cuts in the key. One would have longer ones on the second key.
Okay. The answer is absolutely. That's called master keying. So you can make 2 different keys with 2 different cuts. Remember your experience at the movie theater. The liquor room and the concession room. The manager's got 1 key to go to both doors. You got the key to the liquor. The other guy, the bartender, gets the liquor room key. You get the concession key. Those are different keys. Okay. The manager has 1 key that can go into both. But in the opposite sort of sense, I'm sorry, the manager's key goes into both. That means in the concession key and in the liquor room door, they have been pinned or combinated is the term, such that both the individual key, which was what we call a change key, and the master key that the manager has can operate 1 cylinder. So I could have the manager's key, he can go anywhere in the building. Then I got the key I gave David. He can go to concessions. Both of those keys will enter that concession, the master and Dave's change key. His concession key only, and your concession key doesn't go anywhere else. That's master keying. That's actually a very simple principle. And if we were going to study that further in our head, what would it take for that to actually happen? You know that you have to have shear. The part that people don't usually just, I got it, is what they don't realize is that there are bottom pin tumblers and then there are master tumblers. There are master wafers. So we've established that 0 is the shallowest cut, 9 is the deepest. Let's say this cut is a 2. And let's on the change key. Let's say the master key in that same chamber has a 5. So the cut on the master is going to be deeper than this. Well, actually, that's a bad example. Let's flip it around. The change key, the concession key has a 5. The master has a 2. In order for that to work with the concession key, I got to stick that in there. There's got to be 5 units worth of pin tumbler to make shear. But if I stick the master in there, it only needs 2. It's going to force that pin up into the Bible, and it ain't going to turn. But what if you took the master that required a 2 and you put a 2 pin in there? You take out the key that's got the 2 and you put into the master that's got a 5, or the change key that's got a 5. You got a 2 pin in there and your cut's a 5. What's that going to look like in the plug? The pin's going to be too far down.
It's going to drop.
It's going to drop. 5 minus 2 is 3. But if you put a 3 master in there, a 3 master wafer, it is basically that tumbler I showed you without the point on the bottom. It's just kind of like straight on both sides.
Okay.
That's master keying. Now, in order to reinforce that, I'd have to take it apart and show you. But you have it in your head. That's master keying.
Can you place 2 pins on top of each other?
Put as many in there as you can stick. That's important to know because you got 0 to 9. There's 10 depths. You must be at least 2 away from each because of a reality of the Schlage system. You can't have, there is no 1 master pin. So if you've got a 0 pin, you can have a 2 or greater. And then let's say you had a 0 and a 2, well then you can be 4 or further away. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. but you have to be at least 2. So in any chamber, you can have a key and then 4 masters in it.
Oh,
You could
okay.
make 5 keys work. No. You could make 4 keys work in each chamber. So you could have a 0 and a 2. You could have a 0 and a 2 and a 4. You could have a 0 and a 2 and a 4 and a 6. You could have a 0 and a 2 and a 4 and a 6 and an 8. You can have 5. Is what you can. Provided that one of those keys starts with a 0. But if your key is a 5, you can have a 5 and a 3. You can have a 5 and a 1. You can have a 5 and a 7 and a 5 and a 9. So no matter what, you can get 5 out of that, depending on where you're starting.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had a 4, you could have a 4, 4. You can have a 4 and a 2, a 4 and a 0. You can have a 4 and a 6, a 4 and an 8. So you can have 5 keys work in each chamber of this cylinder. So 5 times 5 is how many different keys can actually work. It's actually wrong. 5 to the 5th power is how many keys would actually work that cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of different keys. The problem with that is you have now created so many shear lines that it would be extremely easy to pick that open. You've got multiple shear lines per chamber, and all you got to do is satisfy a shear line in each of the 5 chambers. The chances of you creating shear in all the chambers is pretty easy. You could take a paper clip and kind of do that rotational thing. You should be able to do that. So the more, what they say is security and convenience are inversely related. You want more convenience, you have less security. You want more security, you have less convenience. So what would make the liquor room and the concession room more secure is to not have multiple keys working on it because you're creating additional shear lines.
Okay, makes sense. Could you make a lock without the pins and just make it shear force? Just an odd idea. Say same thing, kind of like the Egyptian, just have the main pole, say 2 sticks out this way, and then just kind of do a locking mechanism of that.
Sure.
And just make a lock.
Of course you could. And in fact, of course, these brilliant people that have lived in the history of locksmithing have thought all this through. There is the Gemini platform from Kaba that has cuts. It's a flat bladed key. It's got cuts up here, and then it's got cuts in the edge. You could have cuts down here, is basically what you're saying, so that you have to satisfy shear line here and shear line down here. And in that case, shear line, and I actually think it might be this way, and this way is how that might be. But yeah, you could have multiple faces of the key engaged in satisfying different shear lines. In the case of the Medico, you're satisfying shear lines on the side of the key and in the top of the key. And the Medico 3 actually has something with the tip of the key that you have to satisfy. So there are 3 points, 3 areas of individual shear that you have to satisfy to get that to turn. You have to have 15 arms and 100 fingers on each arm to make that work, in my opinion, if you're going to try to pick that open without the key. And you got to be the size of an ant.
Yeah, and that's how looking at the profile of the key, looking at all the information on the key allows you to kind of do that.
It allows you to have X-ray vision. If you see that key, you know what's happening on the inside of that cylinder. If you're studied enough, you know by looking at that key, you realize by deduction what must be happening on the inside of that cylinder, just by what the hell is going on the key itself. Observation. Observation is important, where you notice these things and then you search out, well, why is that element on the key? Next week I haven't taken everything over there. I've got some other, I do have some other cylinders. I'll show you some other stuff. Yeah, I had a Brahma cylinder here that I know that I've moved out of here. It's a very special key in the sense of just, it's very old technology, but it's tumblers, but it's a tubular style key. Really cool.
Okay.
It's all variations on a theme is what it is. And what the race really is for people is to have patent protection, because it all boils down to, a guy called yesterday, and a customer called, and his coworker lost the key to the front of the building. And the landlord is like, I need to charge you $1,000 to rekey those, because there's a lost key. Someone could find the key and get in. I get that.
Same situation as the movie theater when I had the same thing. they give you the keys. These are keys for all the doors for inside the building. So if you lose that one key, you have to change either all the locks in the building or change the keys.
And the employee.
And
Got to be careful.
Yeah, very careful.
So, doesn't that seem to you like excessive? Do we really have to change all the locks? The answer is yes. Yes. If you want to be secure, absolutely yes. Because, check this out. If I've got your managers, and this is only for intellectual discussion, if I had access to your manager's lock, and I had my key that I know does not work, that lock, and I had knowledge of the system, let's say my key in the first chamber had a 2-cut. I should be able to put that key in there and cut that 0, 4, 6, and 8, the other possibilities, and eventually one of those possibilities will probably turn that. You can, if you've got blanks and if you've got blanks and knowledge of the system, you could, through trial and error, create a master key, or at least determine the other cuts that would be required on a key to work that cylinder, which means what are the other pin tumblers in the cylinder. And that's part of why, we've got to have a guy come in here who is, he's $100 an hour, because it took him 30 years to learn how to do this. It's not excessive, actually. And who knows what key it was, because if you've got one key, it tells you a lot about the system. It just does. So that's why that's really, you don't want to lose keys. What they really should do, though, is, you want to have a key system that you can't get the blanks, that you can get at Home Depot, obviously. Who's not gone to Home Depot or Ace Hardware and had a key cut? If it's a high security blank and you can't get the actual blanks, then, well, it's a problem because you lost the key and you don't know who has it. But at least that person can't go duplicate the key, at least not by reasonable means.
And say you can just use 2 keys at once for a lock. Count it as one, and then when take it out, comes with 2.
There's a system called, there's a system that has a piece of metal that's a folded key like this, and it's got cut on either sides. I don't think they're different biddings, though, although they might be. Yeah, so when you're creating these other shear lines, you're creating mathematically far more combinations that can work a lock. You're also making it technically hopefully more difficult to pick the lock or bypass the lock. The multi-lock sign that we have out there, what these guys have is, imagine that pin tumbler. Imagine a hole drilled inside of that pin tumbler, and you've put into it another tumbler. Your key has a round cut, and then in the center of that round cut has either a deeper hole or a shallower hole. So the outside pin tumbler has to sit, and the inner one has to sit in the proper location, so I create shear up here. So I've got 2 shear lines for one key in each chamber, making it, how are you picking that? How are you gonna bypass that lock? You're gonna kick the door in. You're gonna drill a hole through the cylinder. So this technology. It also gets to be, I had said earlier about picking the door open in 10 minutes. Are you going to be able to stand outside in front of the building for 10 minutes without someone seeing you? You know what I mean?
Doing trial and error and then...
Yeah. Hey, man, what are you doing to that door? So,
Okay.
This is a very deep ocean that you've just walked, ankle deep into.
Different possibilities, though, to do.
The understanding of locksmithing is only limited by the person's mental acuity. Meaning, I've dove pretty deep, and I've hit the bottom because that's where my brain has said, "No, Moss, that's Rich. That's all you get. You can't go further." I could, but I don't. I can't because I can't. I don't have the time. I have the gray matter to learn how locks work, all locks, but I don't have the exposure to the experience. I'll never gain the practical experience.
That's hard too as well.
It is. I mean, I don't know how locks work on motorcycles. That's its own world. Locks on motorcycles. I don't even own a motorcycle. So we're going to continue on. Actually, next week will have to be Thursday because Friday I won't be here, so just Thursday of next week.
Okay.
And we're going to continue through the book, and we are going to at some point discover we need to take a side trip like we did today to go through the stuff, because there will be a point where you'll go to a locksmithing class, and I want you to be able to go there reasonably prepared with, okay, so that you can take that knowledge and actually apply it to the exercise that you're working on, not having to start flat-footed like learning what broaching and milling is. Oh, you got that already. You're ready to now try to make a key for the cylinder because you know those terms. And that's the goal of this stuff. Yeah, luckily Barb has to take this apart in order to key it, so I'm not going to put it back together because I don't have tools within reach. Yeah, cool.
Okay, nice.
I'm going to order pizza now.
Nice.
Yeah.
Didn't bring much for lunch today, so.
I'm ordering it right now, so we'll see you in an hour.
Okay, sounds great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for attending class 2.
Yeah.
So all this, so is this the lock job that's here? This stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
That's for the keys as well.
Okay, so what I'll ask you to do is, I'm going to put this all here. When you come back from lunch, if you'll explain to Barb what we've done here. Listen, part of the reason that I don't want you to be keying locks yet, because you have a job. Part of Barb's workflow is that every day she keys cylinder. At some point, it's going to become part of your workflow because it has to. Barb can't be the only person, or Terry was the only person at one time keying locks. You are going to learn how to do that, absolutely. We're just not there yet.
Okay.
Meaning if I needed 400 locks keyed by Tuesday, guess what, Dave? You're learning how to key locks today, and that's what you're doing. Shipping's going to wait, but I want this to be more natural.
Okay.
I want it terms. Talk about terms, side paths that you want to go on. That's what we're doing. But this kit is, you're going to understand that everything inside of there. See you in an hour.
All right.
Again, thank you for watching, and if you've enjoyed this video, please click thumbs up, please subscribe, and maybe even send the video to someone that you know. Thank you.